You don't need to buy a new RTX 4090, nor do you need, or probably want to be fair, to buy the new Ryzen 9 7950X. But does anybody actually need any of the new hardware that launched over the last 3 weeks? All the products on the table in front of me are incredibly powerful, provide groundbreaking performance, but are they really necessary? And is it a good thing for consumers that they cost just so much? It's something I've been thinking about a lot when testing all the new products for the channel. And it makes me wonder, after the last 2 years of waiting for new hardware that's not only A, in stock, that's a start, but B, available at a decent price point, are all these launches actually what gamers around the world really wanted? I'm not quite so sure. So let's talk about it. I'm in a bit of a mood to rant. This video's gonna piss a few people off, but I mean, heck, if there's any time to do it, it's probably now. Let's do this. Now, looking at all these new hardware releases, just to be really clear for anyone watching this video, and for the avoidance of doubt, the 4090 is the best gaming graphics card the gaming industry has ever seen. It is incredible. Performance-wise, it tops every chart. It's miles ahead. It's like 150 FPS ahead of the next best GPU. It is a piece of engineering marvel. The same can sort of be said for the new Ryzen 7000 lineup, though Intel look to have sort of taken AMD's thunder before the bolt has even properly struck with their 13th gen. More on that and why I'm a little more positive about that launch later. But is it really what gamers want? Now, if you look at the facts, the 4090 pretty much sold out everywhere on the first day. Stock levels are now back in a lot of places and you can still pick yourself up a 4090. But there's no doubts that this launch was a positive one from the outset. It's also one where Nvidia took a lot of heat for pushing up prices. If you take a look at the cost of the 4090, it comes in at $1,699 MSRP. That's before your board partners like MSI, Asus and GeekaWhat have given it a go, added their own more expensive designs on, made a bit of profit on top, and before, of course, retailers have adjusted prices to meet demand. That's around $200 more than the original MSRP for the 3090, which is the equivalent card of this from the last generation, and represents quite a hefty price increase. I remember when Nvidia first launched a $1,000 GPU, or not all that long ago, and everyone went, oh my god, it's so expensive! This is like nearly double! It's like $1,800 for a decent aftermarket unit. Of course, the Founders card's great, but there's a reason Nvidia can sell that at $1,699 or even potentially lower in the future. And it's the same with the as of yet unreleased RTX 4080. No, not the 12 gig one that they've since unlaunched, but the 16 gig one that's still around. For a $1,199 MSRP, that's nearly double the RTX 3080 launch for back in September of 2020. Now, what makes that even more difficult as a pill to swallow is that the 3080 was in of itself quite a big price upgrade over the last generation 2080. But that was fine and people lived with it on the basis that, well, you basically couldn't buy any cards and we were in the grip of a massive crisis in terms of supply chain and components. So not only will consumers have to stomach a price increase on GPUs this time around, it's following off the back of another big price increase in GPUs last time around. It's no wonder Nvidia aren't discontinuing the 3080. Obviously they've got quite a few units of that card left to sell, and it's an outstanding GPU by the way. I really don't understand people's hesitation against buying the 30 series cards. They're incredible, especially if you've got a 10 series design, but that's besides the point. But it's actually the second price increase people have had to cope with in the space of about 2.5 years. Now, in defense of Nvidia, whose cards are more expensive, and in defense of Intel, whose CPUs also cost more than 12th gen, we are in the midst of a global financial crisis. Inflation's at record highs, and these brands aren't totally shielded from that. The price of their raw materials and their labor costs have gone up too, so I can kind of understand it. But back to that point about the upcoming 4080, I'd argue it's not even really a one-for-one replacement to the 3080. It costs $500 more, so already it needs to be nearly twice as good to give you exactly the same price to performance metrics on paper. To be clear, I'm expecting the 4080 to be fantastic, but that then starts to raise another argument. Do you really need a GPU that fantastic? Now, you're probably thinking, James, are you really telling me that a graphics card could be bad because it was too good? It's sort of, and this is the point I'm getting at. Most consumers will never ever need the power of a 3080, at least not until about 5 years time, when more demanding games come out that can actually require that headroom at the likes of 1440p. What most consumers need is an RTX 3060 Ti or 3070 tier GPU at a more affordable price point. And if Nvidia aren't launching the 4080, obviously until November, with a rumoured 4070 and 4060 Ti to follow in Q1 of next year, at what point do we actually start to see an amazing budget GPU that everyone actually wants to buy? I mean, on that subject, AMD, where the hell are you? Where is RDNA 3? You told us it was coming Q4. I still believe it. Yeah, fair play, I'll give you some credit. But AMD are going to do the same. It's the same in every single product launch. They'll launch the 70, whatever the hell it's going to be called, 70... Wait, are they going to call their GPU the 7900X? Because they have a CPU now called the... So let's say they call their GPUs the 8000 series and you get the 8900 XT or the 8900 XT. They're going to do that. The yields on the silicon they use are lower. They always launch the Halo products. The 4090 is just Nvidia going, here's a card we know you probably can't afford, but look how amazing all of our technology is. It was always going to be a demonstration of, fair play to Nvidia, the incredible tech, especially in DLSS 3, that they've got to offer and that they can bring to the market. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I know what the solution is. I'm sure manufacturers would probably say, well, James, there's not really that much of an appetite for budget components right now, or mainstream parts like the 3050, 60 or 60 Ti, and that if there was, people would be buying them in their droves. But I'm worried from the comments I see from you guys that everyone's just in this sort of position of waiting about. And with obviously the global financial situation, which is really, really terrible for so many people, I can't necessarily see people's appetites for picking up components is going to skyrocket all that quickly. As well as some of these parts costing more money, or me being, in the case of Nvidia, probably just a bit too impatient for the cheaper GPUs to release. There are also some other genuinely concerning factors at play, which I'm just not happy about. Maybe they're unavoidable, but let me talk to you a little bit about what I mean. AMD Ryzen 7000, great CPU lineup. Really, really strong in terms of putting them on a graph, showing them against the competition, and going, look how good this new Ryzen 7 is compared to the last gen i7, which is obviously what was tested at the time of launch, or AMD's own previous Ryzen 7 chip. But these CPUs support DDR5 memory only. DDR5 memory is expensive. They support X670 and B650 motherboards, which are both expensive. Without sounding like an old man that should put his stick down and stop complaining, a few years ago, you could pick up a Ryzen 5 for $299. That's still the case. Good work, AMD. A 16 gig kit of memory for $75, and a cheap B450 motherboard on the affordable overclocking chipset for about $80. I've done some research on PC Part Picker in the very scientific GeekaWhat fashion, and the cheapest low latency 32 gig RAM kit I can find of DDR5 is $229. That's before you've even got to choose whether you like the colour, whether you like the RGB, whether, damn, you like the brand it's manufactured from. That is over double the cheapest 32GB CL30 DDR4 kit, which comes in between $95 and $125, depending on which kit you pick. Shock, you can actually choose which RAM kit you want. Same with motherboards. The cheapest B650 motherboard I can find costs $199. 3 years ago, you could pick up a similar board with similar performance, similar connectivity for $70 or $80. And that is the major problem. It doesn't matter for the Ryzen 9, same with Intel, who have actually, to be fair to them, supported the cheaper DDR4 tech and released cheaper motherboards that haven't gone up in price. Hallelujah, I'm glad someone's doing something. But for these Ryzen 9 chips, it doesn't matter as much, because you can afford, if you're spending $600 on a CPU, a great CPU I might add, to throw another couple $100 in the kitty for some more expensive RAM or a more expensive motherboard, or obviously in the case of Ryzen 7000, whether you like it or not, both. But is it any good for the mid-range builder who's got $1,000, $1,200 to spend on a really nice system? Probably not. I mean, obviously the positives to this are that there are plenty of GPUs going at the moment, and there's some great prices on them too, and I'll link a few decent options below. In short, RX 6600, RTX 3060, RTX 3060 Ti, really great options at affordable prices with really good performance. And to be clear, I don't really know what the answer is. With the price of raw materials going up and inflation around the world, some of this is a natural byproduct. But I can see in 12 months' time, some of the big PC hardware brands turning around and going, we've not sold as many units as we forecast. And I won't be surprised, because plainly, the stuff that's coming out at the moment is too expensive. Maybe this will all change when Nvidia and AMD bring their budget GPUs to the fore. And I mean, Intel of all people, despite some of the struggles is the diplomatic word that their Arc lineup of GPUs are facing, in have actually managed to deliver graphics cards that are like really, really cheap. They've got like a 100 and, let me get this right so I don't embarrass myself. Here we go, a $139 GPU. Now, it's not a $139 GPU I can particularly recommend at the moment, and there's a reason it's cheap. Intel are trying to obviously drive up that early adoption, but when was the last time Nvidia or AMD released anything even close to a $139 GPU? Now, maybe that's just not the market they want to sit in. Fair play, not my businesses, I understand. The 3050, for example, awesome graphics card, but it's going to set you back, what, double the new Intel entry-level art card would be. I think I just struggle a little bit when looking at the budget gamers out there, and I can't help but feel like despite some of the good options out there, the glut of available used hardware, obviously older CPUs that are still more than good enough, a little sorry for those not even at the budget, but in what I would classify as the middle ground, the $800, the $900 PC builders who before would have been able to really easily assemble a rig with brand new components and just can't anymore. Maybe what we really need is a load of new games coming out that are more demanding and can help to justify this new high-end hardware. And maybe the view for us mainstream gamers out there is that we need to look past the newest generation and pick up very, very capable hardware from Intel's 11th or 12th gen, or even AMD's Ryzen 5000, many of which still provide great options for consumers looking for brand new parts with great performance that don't break the bank. What was the point of this video? Have you just wasted 10 minutes of your time? Maybe. And am I really particularly angry about this? No. I just really hope that we start to see the technologies in these fantastic new high-end products trickle down to ones that are more affordable for the majority of people. DLSS 3 is going to be a game changer when it lands on a $350, $400 GPU, but when that will be, I'm not quite sure. All I can say is that I'm incredibly thankful that Intel decided to maintain DDR4 memory support and cheaper, affordable motherboards for their 13th gen. Things with AMD will get better on the mainstream. I'm sure by the time that Ryzen 8000 launches in a year or 18 months time, DDR5 prices might just be on parity with DDR4. And maybe motherboard prices will have dropped for good measure too. But for now, you'll have to call me the pessimist, because I can't help but feel a little bit, just a tiny bit, like 18 months or 2 years of waiting hasn't quite materialized yet in the way many of us would have hoped. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll join you next time around for a more positive video, which is a bit more upbeat, but I hope you enjoyed the slightly different take in this one.